Hello, everyone. I'd like to officially welcome you to today's session, Stories from Service, focusing on the living allowance. I'm Calvin Landrum, a training coordinator with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. Joining our production team are Jessica and Indy from our partners at Education Northwest, who will be managing the WebEx technology and will be helping address questions you may have during the session. We are also joined today by two wonderful vistas, Eugenia Hannon and Marie Stratter, who will share with us about their different experiences living on the living allowance in two different communities and situations. Then we'll spend some time looking at resources and ideas for budgeting and saving on expenses. We will talk to both of them in just a bit, but before we do, I want to take some time to speak about the living allowance objectively. Now, this is designed as a full-time immersion program. The living allowance intentionally enables you to live very frugally like the communities that you're serving. It's an important part of the experience that we really feel helps connect you with the community and gain a deeper, more visceral understanding of the issues facing those in poverty. That being said, we are not unaware that living on the living allowance can be difficult and that everyone will experience the living allowance differently. For some vistas, the living allowance is the most money that they've ever made, while for others it may be a supplement to an already established income, such as a spouse or a family support. Some vistas right out of college may be supporting themselves for the first time, and for others it may be business as usual. There are vistas serving in the largest cities and the smallest towns that are living completely different lives and have access to completely different resources. So, how do we address this large topic? Well, we've heard from vistas that above all else, they'd like to hear from other vistas, and they'd like some tangible tips and tools. So that's really where we're headed today. So let's take a look at our agenda. And now, we wouldn't dream of trying to capture the nuances of every vista's experience. So while this webinar will not be all-encompassing, we'll start by addressing some common questions about the living allowance and hear from a couple members serving in different parts of the country. Along the way, we'll ask to hear from you about your own experiences and what's worked well for you. We ask that you help keep the comments and the discourse positive and informational, and at the end, we'll have some time for a more formal Q&A. We may not be able to get to all the questions and comments, but hopefully we can address a good portion of them. So let's get started. We want to take a second to address some of the stickier questions that we get about the living allowance. We've been asked many, many times, why can't you raise the living allowance? Why am I making so little? And honestly, the answer is very simple. So as you probably know, the living allowance is based on the poverty rate for the county where you're serving. Even though this is intentionally a part of the VISTA experience, even if we wanted to change the living allowance, the budget for the allowance is determined by the legislation that created the VISTA program, the Domestic Volunteer Service Act of 1973. We'd love to give you all raises for the work that you do, but it would take a literal act of Congress, and we all know how that is going right now. It'd be very difficult for us to do that. Another pain point for many vistas is the issue of taxes. Now, taxes are subjective and will always vary from person to person, so it's really almost impossible for the VISTA program to give individual tax advice. What we can tell you is that federal taxes are taken out of your living allowance, but state taxes are not, and that each VISTA is responsible for finding out their individual state tax liability. Check out the website of your state tax office or just give them a phone call and talk through it. They're the experts, and they have all of the answers about your individual state tax liability. There are also a bevy of resources available online to help you understand your taxes, such as the IRS.gov website, which is a treasure trove of information. They have simulators, they've got trivia, they've got tutorials, they have fact sheets, Q&As, all kinds of things on the IRS.gov website. So we're going to change gears now and get to know our two guest presenters that have been patiently waiting in the wings for us. First, we want to know what kind of community you're serving or living in. Is it rural, suburban, urban? Is it a space colony? Take a second to answer the poll on the right side of the screen. And if you want to get more specific, share the city or state that you're serving in the chat box. We'll wait a second for that poll to pop up. We got someone in Des Moines, Iowa. Let's see. Clark County. Where's Clark County? I don't know what that is. Is that Michigan? Washington. Oh, Clark County, Washington State. We got San Francisco, California. I've never been. I hope to get there at some point this year. Lawrence, Kansas. Durango, Colorado. There's a lot of vistas in Durango, Colorado. I hope you've been able to meet up with some of them. Space City, Texas. That's really funny. I'm also from Texas, so I can relate. There are a lot of places that look like Mars in Texas. Let's see, our poll is still going. We got Hutchins, Texas. I think I've driven through there once. Spartanburg, South Carolina. Seattle, Washington. I was just there. That's a fun place. Oh, Space City is Houston. That makes sense. Okay, I've been to Houston before. The Johnson Space Center is such a fun place. We got Denton, Texas, been to Denton. All right, so let's see, our poll is done. What type of community are you serving in? We've got a few people in rural. It looks like urban areas are our #1 community that people are living in. We got one person in the space colony. Hello, welcome. We're so glad you can make it. And let's see, when you started, were you new to the community? We've got people that were totally new, had never been there before. A little bit familiar. Let's see. Nope, this is where I'm from. Way to get back to your home place. We got 15 people there just like, I don't know about this poll, but that's okay. Cool. So thanks for giving us a little insight to where you all are from. We got a bunch of people from urban areas who are totally new to those places. That's always really fun, is getting to know a new place. So let's get to our first guest. Our first guest is Marie. And Marie is serving in a more rural environment in Salmon, Idaho. So thank you so much for joining us, Marie.
Well, thank you, Calvin, for having me.
We are so excited that you're able to call in from beautiful Salmon, Idaho. I'm looking at these pictures on our slide, and it looks gorgeous. We got some mountains, some snow. Is there still snow on those mountains?
On some of the mountains, yes, but not in the town anymore. The temperatures are rising, and we are in the 70s now, I believe.
Oh, very nice. I wish we could say the same about D.C. It's been a little rainy and muggy over here. So, Marie, can you tell us a little bit about where you're serving and what you do on your project?
Yes, so as Calvin already said, I serve in Salmon, Idaho, which is one of the most remote communities in the lower 48. It's a town of 3,000 people in a county of 8,000, and we are 2.5 hours away from any interstate. I serve in a nonprofit organization called Salmon Valley Stewardship, and particularly I work with a subgroup called Salmon Valley Local Foods, trying to strengthen the local foods network. So I'm working with producers, consumer education, organizing home food preservation workshops, and programming on sustainable agriculture. So trying to create a resilient local food network in one of the most remote areas of the U.S.
Oh, awesome. Sounds like you're doing some really good work there. I really love, food projects and projects around food sustainability. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
No, thank you.
So what's life like in Salmon? I mean, you said it's pretty rural. Were you new to the community there when you, first arrived or when you started your project?
So yes, to answer this question, I moved to Salmon from LA. So I moved from a big city of 17 million to a town of 3,000 people. I had never even stepped my foot into Idaho, not to mention Salmon, so I didn't know anybody. I was new. Life here is very, very slow, and it sort of follows the pace of the seasons as they go. And, living in such a rural, remote area, people really understand how dependent they are on the sort of natural forces around them. In the summer, we have a lot of forest fires, so we have seasonal firefighters coming to town. Town is really busy also with river outfitters and outdoor enthusiasts, mountain bikers. And when the summer moves along and autumn comes, then life just slows down, and there's a little bit more of like fishing and hunting and those kind of outdoor activities. And then winter is a prime time for outdoor snow winter sports such as snowboarding and cross-country skiing and hockey. So there's a lot of outdoor activities.
I love it. It's a good place to be, if you are a fan of the snow. I am not a fan of the snow, so I'm not sure how well I'd fare in Salmon, but it sounds like a beautiful place, and from the pictures that we have, it looks like it also.
It's beautiful. wonderful.
So what was it like for you trying to settle into the community? Who around there, helped you, kind of get your legs, and wrap your brain around life in Salmon?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, as I said, I am new to the community, or I was. So I was, had my own frights of what could it be like, how will I blend in. But everybody has been just super welcoming, both my coworkers at my serving site and the new friends and just members of the community that I've met. One of the struggles, though, as I did arrive in the very end of August, in the sort of end of the fire season, it was very, very difficult to find accommodation. So when we did find a house, that's just, what we had to go for. We didn't have any other options. There was just one rental that became available, and we just went for it. But, yeah, everybody in the community has been super supportive, throughout my whole stay here. So I couldn't have wished for a better experience.
All right, so it's really funny you said there's one rental left in the entire town. Some people have a hard time finding, affordable housing, but it sounds like you had a hard time finding housing at all, no matter what the price was.
Correct, yes. So for a few weeks before my arrival, I was just looking and sort of really trying to tap into every possible resource from local Facebook groups, because apparently people don't really use Craigslist here, and trying to, activate my coworkers who were already, here at my serving site, trying them, to ask around from their friends, and there was just nothing available for a few weeks. And literally 5 days before coming here, I had not secured a place to live, so it was very stressful. And then suddenly this one house became available, and I didn't really care what the price was at this point in time. I just said, yes, please, I need a home.
So, yeah, you definitely need a place to live. That's, the first part of starting your service. So you moved from LA, to Salmon. Have you had to, adjust your priorities at all, in order for you to live well on the living allowance?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that living well means, very different things to different people. In the past years, even if I did live in a big city, I've been trying to sort of rethink my priorities and really simplify life. So even when I was living in LA, I was trying to, I was biking to work every day. I was, preparing home-cooked meals. What has changed, though, is that in Salmon, we don't have maybe the forms of entertainment that I would enjoy, may it be good, sustainably, locally sourced foods, different restaurants to go out and eat at. So in LA, that was one of our, weekend favorite things to do, and we went for it. But luckily, I would say I don't have that here in Salmon, and so living on a living allowance has been just easier because I don't have places to actually, put my money into. And yeah, in that sense, priorities, yeah, during this year, I'm not definitely saving any money, and, I'm not putting anything away. But at the same time, living simply, one can really do a whole lot.
Yeah, no, totally. I also enjoy eating out, but I also know the power of a good cookbook. If you got a good cookbook, you can really feed yourself well, make some great dishes, even on a budget.
Sorry, can you repeat this question?
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just making a statement about, about how a good cookbook can really help you, make some better food choices and really reduce the cost, of going out to eat and all that stuff.
Oh, I do agree. Yeah, from scratch cooking, with real ingredients, even if you do get, good quality meats or other sources of, ingredients, it's just a lot more affordable than eating out. So I think from my part, truly, if I would have one recommendation to folks who are living on a budget, cooking at home, may it be oats for breakfast and the scrambled eggs for lunch. My breakfast and lunch cost generally less than $1. And then, at dinner at home, I generally splurge a little bit more and, make a few dollar meal probably, but it's definitely possible.
Totally. So I want to ask you, we've talked previously in preparation for this webinar, and you mentioned, some resources in your community, that you found. Can you elaborate a little bit more on those?
Yes, for sure. So I have really sort of tapped into the resources in my own community because I'm from Europe, and I sort of feel like in America there's a mindset that every person needs to own everything, but nowadays there's a lot more sort of the collaborative consumption patterns coming up. So, maybe I don't need to own each and single item. So, if I needed cross-country skis in the winter, buying them would have been quite expensive, even if I only just went out for a few times. So borrowing equipment and supplies can be a really good way of, living affordably and, not really contributing to buying stuff when we don't really need it. From an maybe entertainment point of view, I mean, just organizing potlucks is a really good way of just having fun in the evenings, getting a few friends together and not really spending a whole lot of money. I have written down something that is called a cow share, or that I call a cow share. So buying meat can be a more affordable option if you can find a local farmer or rancher who is sort of pre-selling their animals, and you can prepay and get a quarter and just put it in your freezer and have pretty much meat available for the whole year. If you are a meat eater, if you're a vegetarian, then life's even easier. At the farmers markets, I would suggest, show up in the very end of the market, and you may be able to secure pretty good deals because farmers are trying to get rid of the produce that they have and they don't want it to go to waste. So you often can get really, really good deals. And at many farmers markets across America, if you are using SNAP benefits, there are more and more markets who are doubling your SNAP dollars. So they call it sort of a double up food bucks program. So you can tap into that and see if in your area farmers market accepts SNAP cards, as well as if there's maybe a matching or doubling program. So, for example, in our farmers market, you will spend $10 during this year's season, and you actually receive $20 worth of fresh fruits and vegetables.
That's such a good bargain.
For sure. So these are really just some of those items that I feel like people can look into and, look further than the grocery store, particularly as what, comes to our food sources. And, especially, what we own, we maybe just simplify a little bit and clean the closet and take some stuff to the thrift store and, possibly even sell some items that we don't really use.
Totally. No, I agree. I clean out my closet. I try to every season, get rid of all the things, try to keep it as minimal as possible. I want to move on to, another thing that we've spoken about, and that's, gardening and growing your own food. I know that, you said that you've started a garden. I think we have a photo of that. Yeah, if you look on the right side, those are Marie's actual little gardeners there that she's got set up. So what do you grow, for yourself?
So what do I grow? This year I actually have already harvested radishes that were delicious. These are the ones that you can see in the middle box there. I have plenty of different salad greens, different types of kale, Swiss rainbow chard. So these are sort of the green area. I've also planted some pole and bush beans, some heirloom tomatoes, cucumbers. Let me think if I put anything else. I have a raspberry bush on the right-hand side, but I'm not sure if it will carry any fruit this year. And if I'm going to move, I guess somebody will move in. We'll have a beautiful garden. Yeah. If any Vista volunteers want to come and live in Salmon, Idaho, then there will be a position opened and possibly even a house. So, yeah, what else do I plant? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just a lot of salad greens. I didn't really bother with many of those sort of winter vegetables and winter squashes because, I may be moving on in September, and I wanted to get just a bunch of sort of summer fresh greens that I can just go, and herbs, of course. I've got my rosemary, my thyme, my oregano, parsley, all that stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's really important to keep in mind, maybe keep in mind the life cycle of your Vista service. Like you mentioned, you won't be there in the winter, so it didn't make sense for you to use your time and resources on planting, winter vegetables or winter things, because you won't be there.
Yes, correct. So I was just trying to think of, what will I actually use? And, for the garden space, gardens can become expensive if you are, buying all the dirt and materials that you want to sort of make the garden out of. But, again, tap into the resources in your community. There's a lot of, all of that you can see on that photo is pretty much scrap wood. There was a new library being built, and there was a lot of stuff just being thrown away, including those boxes that weren't originally garden boxes, but just they worked out.
Nice, nice. Way to be resourceful. So if someone wanted to get started, making their own garden, do you have any tips for beginners on growing their own food?
Well, I would pretty much say it's a trial and error thing. I'm very much a beginner too. In LA, we just had a few little earth boxes in our balcony space because our space was very limited. If you live in a four-season climate, there's a book that I would really recommend. It's Elliot Coleman's Four-Season Harvest. But as what comes to real beginner sources, if you can find somebody in your community who is a sort of gardening expert or has knowledge, they may have tips and tricks about what works in your climate, in your soils, because gardening, as much as we want to believe that we can just order seeds from the other side of the country and they will thrive, it's not often the case. So I think sort of climate resilient agriculture and gardening is the key to, being able to feed ourselves in the future. So trying to really tap into this sort of regional kind of agriculture, because we live in a high altitude climate, and there's a lot of permaculture projects on the East Coast, but the climate and conditions are very different over here. So yeah, just find an expert in your area and befriend them, and you can possibly get started a lot quicker than you would on your own.
Hey, thanks. So we're going to sort of wrap up this portion, but I did want to hit on some really cool and important things that you shared with us previously, and that is, the idea of shopping at a farmer's market. You brought up going towards the end of the day, volunteering, at the farmer's market in exchange, for other goods. So do you volunteer anywhere, at a farmer's market or at a farm or anything?
Yeah, so our farmer's market season goes from June until September, and I arrived in the end of August, so farmer's market season was almost over, and I was very afraid of what my food choices will look like over the winter. But luckily, since December, salmon has been included into the route of a sort of local Idaho-grown food distributor called Idaho's Bounty. And as I sort of helped them, to get started here in salmon, I got the opportunity also to volunteer with them. So on a weekly basis, actually today, right after the webinar, I will go and volunteer at the drop-off point and help distribute the food. And now I get actually the food at cost, which really helps to save a lot. So I have, access to this locally grown produce and meat and eggs and proteins and all that at cost, which, you can look out opportunities in your own area if there are farms that maybe accept volunteers, or find a local CSA, which is community-supported agriculture, so you can actually pay your farmer in advance and then during the growing season receive a box of fresh vegetables and fruits.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on, and for telling us a little bit about your experience. We're going to bring you back a little bit later for the Q&A session, but thank you again so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Calvin.
All right. So as you guys just heard, so Marie talked about a lot of resources that she found from within her community, including, growing her own food, borrowing equipment from her neighbors and supplies, finding entertainment and exercise opportunities outdoors. So we want to know, what types of resources have you found from within your community? Please share with us in the chat box. So, we'd really love to see, what you guys have found. Maybe that's like free, low cost, just things to do, in your new community. Seems like a lot of you, are new to your new urban environment. And as we all know, in cities there tend to be a lot of free things to do. So yeah, share those with us. Let's see, food pantries is what I've tried. Food pantries, excellent option. I mean, it's a place for cheap food. And I know there's a lot of stigma, around going to a food pantry. But I don't feel that there should be, because it is a place to get inexpensive food, and I'm all about some inexpensive food. Food banks and local churches. let's see, we've got, let's find that Q&A. Since I love the farmer's market and applied for EBT benefits. I used to do work share in a CSA in Albuquerque, help harvest 2 or 3 hours a week, and got to share the produce. So it's very similar to what Marie did or is doing. Let's see. Free workouts at a local park. Oh man, I always see people at the park, you know, like running or like, you know, meetups for like running clubs, or someone volunteering, you know, a trainer that says, hey, I'm doing yoga in the park this week, come on by. I work with a senior lunch program, so when I go on site visits, I sometimes score leftovers. Also, I like scooping up extra office meeting snacks if they're offered. We have that in common. I have a job that, you know, I work here for CNCS, and I do the same thing. I'm very cheap, and I love snacks, and I love free snacks even more. Yoga class in the gym, $10 a month gym membership, that is incredible. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Please continue to put those in the chat box. Now we're going to move on and speak to Eugenia Hannon of Vista Serving here in Washington, D.C. Hello, Eugenia.
Hi, Calvin.
So I know you guys can't see us, but Eugenia is here with me in the office. She made the trek over here to the Vista headquarters to be here with us today. I'm really, really excited to have you here. It's always nice when we get Vistas in the office so that we can meet you and, you know, meet the people, you know, that are in our program. It doesn't happen too often. So you are serving in D.C. Can you tell me a little bit can you tell me some about where you're serving and what you do on your project?
Sure. So I'm serving at an education nonprofit called Higher Achievement. And what Higher Achievement does is provide after-school programming to underserved areas, but it's specifically for middle schoolers. But what I do has more to do with the development side of the organization. So I'm working with the Director of Development, doing a lot of research for a new capital campaign that's in the very, very early stages. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Awesome. I love middle school kids. They're very fun. Do you get to work directly with students at all?
No, I spend most of my time doing research, and I don't really have any direct service with the kids, but I have been able to go and visit one of the centers, and I did just start in February, so I haven't really done that much visiting, but the program is great, and the one time I was there, it was really fun. So I'm going to definitely go back and maybe even become a mentor, depending on how much time I have.
Oh, awesome. Well, I hope you get to go back and interact with those students, because I'm sure they love it. So are you new to D.C.? Well, you just said you are new to D.C.
Yeah.
Where were you before?
So I was living in Savannah, Georgia for graduate school, and so I was there for the past 4 years. So that's a very different kind of situation than here in D.C. I've never actually lived in such a big city, so D.C. has been a little bit of a challenge for me, especially with transportation. I didn't bring a car because it was just too expensive, and it's also really difficult to drive here. So life has not been super easy, but it's been very interesting.
Yeah.
And there's always stuff going on. So.
No, definitely. You know, I live here also, and when I first moved here, this was also the largest city that I'd ever been in or lived in. So I feel you about transportation, getting around. It took me a little bit to learn the metro, but I promise you'll get it down. So have you found, you know, what sort of, you know, like free things have you found to do, you know, here in D.C.?
Well, all of the Smithsonian museums, I think that they've pretty much been my first stop in terms of free things, but like, you know, the portrait gallery and just
my favorite.
Yeah, visiting all of the monuments. What other free things? Well, actually, I'll probably mention it a little bit later in more detail, but there is a resource online that this older gentleman actually compiles all of the free cultural events that are happening. It's done on a weekly basis, and I have attended a few of those, but that's just a really cool thing to check out. So.
Awesome. So, moving to D.C., as we know, D.C. is very expensive to live in, incredibly expensive. I know one of the most expensive in the U.S. What was it like for you trying to find a place to live, on a budget?
Oh, well, so I knew that was going to be a really big challenge, and so luckily I got offered my VISTA position back in December, and so I knew I wasn't starting until the end of February, so I had a fair amount of time to prepare. I looked on Craigslist, I did that kind of thing, but actually what ended up working for me was I called an old friend from college, and her younger sister was living, or is living in the city currently. She's doing a graduate program here, and she needed a new roommate, and it really was kind of serendipitous, and, it was, I think, very lucky for me because my situation is probably a little bit more difficult than most other people's because I have 3 cats. So I needed to find somebody that I could have my cats. And so I was preparing for a very difficult search, but it worked out well.
Nice. No, I feel you. I've had to definitely also make compromises. When you live in the city, I have 5 roommates myself. So Heather Shoemaker says I have 3 cats also. So you got someone to relate to you. So what I'm getting here is that if you live in a city, it's great if you already know someone there. No, that's definitely true.
Definitely. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you really, it sounds like you really capitalized on your connections and your networks that you already had. Yeah, I mean, it can be difficult trying to find a place in the city. I moved here, I didn't know anyone, and it was definitely a hunt and a search.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to, kind of go on and move to, sort of how you're adjusting, and what your methods of, budgeting are here. So did you choose to seek out public assistance? And if you did, what was that process like for you?
Well, it's actually still kind of ongoing. I put together an application for SNAP, and I dropped it off, and the name of whatever federal organization, I don't remember where you drop it off, but I went to drop it off.
The benefits office somewhere.
The benefits office, yeah, and it was really, really busy, and I was told that if I wanted to have a meeting or speak with anybody, to get my SNAP benefits approved, I would have to come at 5 in the morning and wait for 3 hours, and it was really intense. And so I just dropped off my application, and it's kind of just been floating in space since then. And I haven't heard anything, and it's been maybe a month and a half. So it should have already been processed, and what I really need to do is, you can't call them because they don't answer the phone, but so I guess I'm going to have to make the trek out there and figure that out because it would definitely help me, but yeah, so.
No, totally. So it sounds like also maybe if you go in person, it's a little easier, maybe to get through to them, which maybe is a helpful hint. If you ever have the choice to go in person as opposed to do it may be a little easier, maybe expedite your process a little more. Cool. So have you considered a second job?
Sure. Yeah. I have a second job, but I only started it, I guess, pretty recently, maybe about 3 weeks ago. And it's a remote freelance film archiving research position that I was, again, I really have been working my connections, and one of my other old friends from college had previously been doing this job, and she knew that I had studied film and was interested, and just Facebook messaged me, and I was able to secure this job.
Awesome. Awesome. See, again, using those networks, using all those contacts that you already have, and really reaching out. So I want to take a second to ask a quick poll of everyone. As you know, VISTAs are allowed to have outside employment, but we want to see what you know about that. So, question is, VISTAs are allowed to have outside employment as long as it is legal, part-time, does not interfere with VISTA assignment, not at the sponsoring organization, approved by the sponsor, or within 5 miles of your site. Now, one of these answers is incorrect, so that's sort of the poll question. I know it says check all that apply, but, choose the one that's incorrect. Is it legal, part-time, does not interfere with your VISTA assignment, not at the sponsoring organization, approved by the supervisor, or within 5 miles of your site. We want to see how much you guys know about the outside employment policy. It's a policy. Let's see, we'll get a little bit more time on that, and then we'll close that. Let's see, while we're waiting, let's take a look. Getting a second job, it can be risky. I mean, you really got to, think about, am I going to have time for this? It's hard, to me, it reminds me, I had a second job. Well, I had 2 jobs when I was in college. At school, 2 jobs, that's a little difficult. You can't check multiple options, guys. Yeah, you can't check multiple options. You'll just have to select the one that is incorrect. And let's see. Maybe we'll close that. Okay, so let's see. The answer is F. That's correct. Within 5 miles of your site. Your second job does not have to be within 5 miles of your site, but it does, have to be legal. What this means that we've gotten the question before was, what is legal? Legal is legal. But there are situations, where maybe someone is living in in Colorado, and they say, hey, can I work at a marijuana dispensary? That is legal state-wise, but that's not legal on a federal level, so your job must be federally legal. Your second job has to be part-time. It can't interfere with your VISTA assignment. Your VISTA assignment always needs to come first. It can't be with your sponsoring organization. So if you work at a school, you can't also be employed there as a tutor. And your second job also has to be approved by your supervisor. There's a process, you just go to your supervisor, say, hey, I'm thinking about this job. What do you think? Does this look cool with you? If it meets all those criteria, they'll most likely say yes. So thanks, guys, for checking that in. It looks like most of you got that right. All right. So some other ideas for outside employment that we thought of, the quote-unquote on-demand economy is sort of a buzzword these days, and that's really made it easy for anyone with a smartphone to pick up side work and earn some extra cash in their downtime. There's apps like Uber and Lyft, which most people are familiar with, but those things allow you to use your personal vehicle, sort of like a cab, and drive people around in your evenings or weekends. Postmates and Instacart are 2 other things that allow you to pick up gigs, delivering groceries and things to people via a car or bike. Upwork.com and Fiverr are 2 really great websites that will allow you to do freelance jobs and just pick up like weird gigs. If maybe you can draw, maybe you have some graphic design skills. People will pay you to design a logo for them, design their band logo, all sorts of things. Good old babysitting and house sitting is an option. You should ask around your organization and see if anyone, has children, if that is something that they'd be interested in. So we want to know, do any of you have second jobs? And if you do, what are they? Or do you have any other ideas for outside employment? Dog walking and bin sitting, dog sitting, that's super fun. If you love animals but can't maybe afford to have one on your own, you can watch other people's. That's sort of my plan, is to be an uncle. I don't want kids, I just want to hang out with other people's kids. Let's see, families don't hire male babysitters. Kyle, you're killing me here. If it's someone that at your organization, maybe they trust you, maybe that is something that you could talk to that person about. Let's see. Online tutoring, that is an excellent option. Whitewater raft guide, what? Andrew Davis, if you're a whitewater raft guiding, I'm very jealous and I'd like to do that. Soccer training, Let's see, Kaylin Allen says, I'm told you are Vista 24/7 by my sponsoring organization. That is not fully incorrect. You are Vista 24/7, and we expect you, to work with your sponsoring organization, full, 40 hours a week, and be available when they need you, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a second job and, take other employment. Pedro, personal Chicago city tour guide. That is so fun. That sounds like the best job I've ever heard of. I would love that to be my full-time job. I love to walk. I love to talk. I love to show people around and tell them things. That's pretty sweet. I like that. I would have never thought of that. That sounds really fun. Let's see. Book reselling. I don't know what that entails. So maybe that's like buying things for cheap, selling them for some money, making some profit in the middle. Flipping things, there you go, flipping things, like antiques and stuff. That's fun, and you make some money. Cool. So we're going to move on and ask Eugenia sort of a personal question about her budget. We were very curious. Given your major expenses and extra income, how do you budget your stipend, and how do you keep track of your expenses?
Well, I do it very carefully.
Good answer.
Yeah, so I basically, have to put aside money for rent and utilities every month, which, as you can see, is the majority of my budget. And then it doesn't leave that much left for grocery, and then, again, transportation is a necessity. So so basically it really helps having a savings if you're interested in coming to a place like D.C., especially if you're in a situation like me where you're not just by yourself and your living situation, you have animals or something that, sometimes have surprise expenses. So savings, and then my second job now definitely helps. So yeah, I have Simple, I have Simple Bank, which is an online banking thing, and it's really easy to keep track of where I'm spending money through my bank, and they also have a really cool goals feature where you can it takes out money. It doesn't actually take it out, but it separates your money into different areas.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because I will also be talking about some goals options. I use an app also that does that. But before we get to that, I see, you spend $100 a month on groceries, which I am just amazed by. How do you accomplish that? And where do you shop?
Well, so I am, again, a lucky thing is that there are Trader Joe's in this city, and there's one that's pretty nearby my site, so I'm able to walk there after work. And I spend about $50 every 2 weeks there. I buy a lot of beans. I buy, tortillas. I've been buying, bulk bags of frozen chicken. It's usually just I make a lot of frozen burritos. I make them, and then I freeze them, and then I heat them up later. And so I don't have a very interesting way of eating, just cereal, burrito. Sometimes I'll splurge and get frozen pizzas.
A fancy meal.
Yeah, peanut butter and jelly is always a solid option. So that's really, figuring out how you're going to, feed yourself for the next week or two on, the Sunday has been really, good for me to do, so.
Awesome. And I see, your rent is a significant portion, of your monthly budget, so it seems like you've had to, make sacrifices in other areas, to make that work. And again, as you can see, you are a Vista member, but this is also the reality for so many people where we're living and where, and across the country that, maybe this is also what their monthly budget is, and they're having to spend a lot on rent. Some people even maybe have children that they have to feed, and like you're saying, your situation may not be possible if you didn't have your second job, if you didn't have savings, but it's also not hard to realize and see, where other people in the community are coming from. When they're like, man, I live in DC, my rent is really high, I've got $100 left for groceries, and it's really difficult,
Right, and it's sometimes, not even a question of, well, just don't live in the city, because then you have to factor in getting to the city, and that's a huge expense. So it's probably evens out if I were to live in the suburbs and then, commute in. So yeah, it's a reality for a lot of people, and it's just, take it day by day.
Cool. All right, so thanks. So now we're going to move on to some budgeting tools. You mentioned Simple. So budgeting, which simply put is the practice of categorizing and tracking your income and expenses. And one of the most important things to remember is that when you're budgeting, it's only going to work if you stick to your budget, find a system that works for you, and really stick to it. I know it took me a really long time to find something that worked for me. I'm really terrible at budgeting. I'm not great at it, and I will admit that to the whole world. But I finally found something that works for me, and it's just a simple writing it down each month, making a list of what are my bills, dividing it by 4. This is how much I have left for each week. That works for me. So there are all kinds of online systems and apps that can help you, track your spending. Mint and Level are really great, and they're free, and they allow you to really categorize each one of your expenses. You can set budgets for each category, and really see easily in charts where your money is going. I personally used Mint for a really long time, especially when I was in service, so that I could, work out exactly what my expenses would be each month. You're able to sync your bank account and your bills, and I even put my student loans in Mint so I could get full financial picture. And I even get notifications to my phone or emails, when I have a bill coming up or when I get close to going over a certain budget. It really helps me, stick to it and, keep on track with my spending and watch it. As you mentioned, the goals feature and Simple, something that I also use. I knew that I wanted to, pay off my credit card and my credit card debt from college, and Mint, the goals option in Mint, helped me figure out exactly how much I would need to save over, a year to make that happen and to pay off that credit card. And look at where we are now. That credit card is paid off. I cut it up. I said I never want to look at you again. But if you're looking for those listening, if you're looking for a simpler, lower tech option, you can also try the envelope system, which is literally you just put your money in an envelope, and that's your cash for the week, and you write down what you're spending on the outside. It's super low tech, very easy. You have one thing. This is your envelope of cash, and that's what you spend. The Vista campus has a really great compiled list of recommended resources for budgeting, along with a budget calculator, comparisons for different budgeting apps, and many more tips and strategies. That link is going to be posted in the chat box, so take a look at that. There's some really great resources in there. So, Eugenia, cities can be daunting, but they also have a lot to offer, in terms of entertainment and events. And as you brought up, the man that posts free things. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So a really good resource for me is the Washington, D.C. subreddit. And usually it's a lot of people complaining about the metro, but in addition to that, there are really good resources. Like I said, there's a gentleman that posts the free cultural events. I was actually recently able to go to a taping of Jeopardy! It's actually the Teen Jeopardy! Tournament. And
amazing.
It was one of the highlights of my life to see Alex Trebek in real life. He's as cool as you would expect. So, I realized that if I were in a different location, I probably wouldn't have that kind of opportunity. And, the taping of Jeopardy! Was totally free. Yep. And it's just, and the Smithsonian, I mean, they're always changing up. The different museums have different exhibits, and I don't even think my entire year here I'd be able to see everything.
All of it. No, totally. Yeah. I've been here for a few months. well, I'll look through it twice, but, you know, there's so much to see.
Yeah.
Someone put in the chat, you know, libraries are always free, FYI. Thank you, Shannon. That's a really important point. Libraries are definitely always free. That's a great place for movies, for books, for CDs, for really anything. I mean, free internet. You know, there's so many resources available at the library. They're usually doing all sorts of events. Another good place, you know, you said Reddit. I am a Facebook events user. There's always events on Facebook, you know, and once you sort of, and I've noticed like once you sort of find your like niche in Facebook, it'll recommend all sorts of other things to you that are similar to that event. So I'm always getting, you know, free, you know, house shows, and it's a great way to like meet people and sort of network and, you know, really find some community. It's just by putting yourself out there and going to these free events that you see advertised in your community. Even if you have to go alone, don't be daunted. You know, you go and you meet someone. It's a good time. That's how I've met a lot of friends here. So thank you so much, Eugenia. It's been wonderful talking to you, and we are going to catch up with you in just a second for our Q&A. But I'd like to focus on some additional resources and ideas for people listening today. So first, on the Vista campus, we have compiled a list of tips and resources that have been generated by previous Vistas. So these are people out there serving just like you. We'll put a link to that in the chat, and it's with the full documentation. We can't go over all of them, but here's a sample of, you know, some that were submitted by their Vistas. You know, ask for gems. Always ask your gem if they maybe have sliding scales, you know, for fees. Some places, you know, if you make under a certain amount, maybe you pay a little bit less. If you know, they adjust what you pay based on your income. Ask if local farmers accept SNAP benefits, and if so, explore if any will match your SNAP benefits. There are a lot that do. Maybe find a bike share or a ride share in your community, or a clothing swap. Those are fun things to do. Ride shares can be found, you know, on the internet. I'm pretty sure there's a website. If you just Google, you know, ride share, I think there is a website that will show you ride shares and connect you with other people in your community. Online, there are lots of free resources. Freecycle.com for free stuff in your area. You can make your own cleaning supplies in bulk, explore coupon and rebate apps. Good and Cheap is a free online cookbook with recipes to fit into a SNAP budget or a just low budget and, you know, overall. And again, these are all ideas generated from other Vistas and people who have walked in your shoes and have, you know, served in their communities and have made the same amount that you have. So we want to ask, you know, what other resources or tips do you have that you would like to share? You know, please place those in the chat box, and we'll take a look at some of those and see what we can find. I see, let's see, resource for finding fruit trees and other produce that would normally go to waste. Fallingfruit.org. Huh, that's so fun. So I can't do ride share because I need to be able to transport equipment kits for events. All right, let's see, don't forget about carpooling. Yeah, maybe you have people in your area. Thanks, Leslie, for that recommendation. Maybe you can find people that you're working with, you know, who maybe you're on their route to work and they can pick you up on the way, you pitch in a little bit, or maybe they're really nice and do it for free. Let's see, always take free food from events after the people have left. You can eat it afterwards. Totally, again, I have zero shame around that. I will take anything that is offered to me. Let's see, be open-minded about your community and try to make friends. Definitely, I'm telling you, don't underestimate the power of your community and the networks that you can build within them. What do we got? Volunteering for festivals, events, concerts is a great way to get in for free. 1,000,000%. If there is a music concert that you want to go to, some sort of festival, volunteer there, and they will let you in or give you, you know, a $10 ticket for volunteering and just exchanging your time. I have lots of friends, you know, who volunteer at, you know, South by Southwest in Austin, and they get to go for free. They get full badges just for volunteering. I'm always so jealous and amazed when I see their pictures, and they didn't spend any money on that. Bloggingforbooks.com, you can get free books in exchange for posting a review. Oh, that's cool. I'm going to write that down because I would like to go there. Let's see. Cool. Yeah, so thanks, guys. Please keep sharing those resources and tips in the chat. So don't forget also, we're going to move on. Forget that, you know, support from your peers is such a invaluable resource. Peer support, you know, we remind you that there is a community forum on the Vista campus that's focused on the living stipend. There's a full forum dedicated to just living on the living allowance. There you can find suggestions from current and former Vistas about ideas to help you stretch your stipend further. That link was just posted into the chat by Indy, so be sure to check that out, copy and paste it somewhere so that you can find it at a later date. You also have the option of support from Vista. So I just want to remind everyone who and what the CSO is, or the Corporation State Office. The CSO is the corporation piece on the ground in your state with you. The CSO interacts mostly with sponsors or your projects and are mostly in the background to ensure that you have a successful and fulfilling year. If you know of a resource in your community that has helped you out, know of great areas to live in, or just have general tips that may help your fellow Vistas out by letting them know, let the CSO know these things so that they can communicate them to Vistas in the future. On the flip side of that, if you have questions about where you're serving and are just looking for information, the CSO can be a great resource. So you can ask your CSO for help even when your site and your supervisor are already providing you support. These guys have, they live there. Everyone in your CSO, they live in the place that you live, so they know, most of them have been there for years, and they know, about all these resources. They've interacted with every Vista that has come through their state. They're a wealth of knowledge. So to email your CSO, it's very simple. The email address is just your state abbreviation @cns.gov. So Tennessee would be TN@cns.gov, and New York would be NY@cns.gov. You can also find their contact information via nationalservice.gov/state offices, and some CSOs even have pages on the Vista campus, so you can go there and connect with other Vistas serving in your state. So we want to move on to some next steps to work on after this session. So first, connect with your community. Your local community, neighbors, stores, and agencies, they have a lot of knowledge and resources to share. As we talked to Marie, you can see that she really reached out to her community, and has been borrowing skis, found out about about CSAs and farmers market, and is really getting a lot of support from her community. So starting a simple conversation can often lead to a little-known community resource or opportunity. So try asking at least one person for local tips. That is my challenge to you. Find some random stranger, ask them, hey, what's going on here in the community? What do you have going on this weekend? What is around here that you can think of that might be a fun or interesting thing to do? Second, start or review your personal budget system. We discussed a few online tools and some low-tech options. Just find one that works for you. And remember, budgets don't work unless you follow them, so take time to find a system that's going to work for you. It may take some trial and error, but you will find it, and when you do, you're going to be amazed at how much easier it is to manage your budget. Finally, check out the Vista Campus resources and forums. There's an entire site devoted to resources for managing your living allowance, as well as a forum for members to share their tips and questions. So I hope you're able to take one or two of these steps and eventually develop a system that works for you. Be sure to share your experiences on the Vista campus with other Vistas. So that's almost going to wrap up our webinar today. We're about to jump into our Q&A portion. But before we do, we want to know what you thought. So on the right side of your screen, you'll find a quick poll where you can share feedback about this webinar. So please take a moment to answer the questions. We'd like to be able to improve these webinars, and your input helps us so much. We really do listen to what you say, and we try to base our webinars around all of the input that we get. But this webinar went through a lot of iterations before we settled on something because of the input that we received from you all. So please take a second to fill that out. So now that we've given you so much to think about, we want to take a second for your questions. So you can ask a question using the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. And I'll also ask our operator to let us know how to ask questions by phone. Dennis, would you please let us know?
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question today on the phone, please press *1. You'll be asked to record your name prior to asking a question. Again, that will be *1 to ask a question on the phone line.
All right. Thank you so much, Dennis. While we're waiting for people to join us on the phone, I'm going to scroll through the Q&A and pull some questions out of there and see what kind of answers we can get. So let's see. What do we got here? Let's see. Oh, Marie, this is for you. So here's a question for you, Marie. How much space do you have at your rental place that you have enough room to make a garden? It seems like maybe you have, a yard there?
Yes, a good question. Space-wise, I don't really know the square footage area, but the yard, I mean, we have a really big yard, I would say, by my European standards. And the garden sort of area was already there. However, apparently just before we had arrived, somebody had heavily sprayed it with Roundup to kill all the weeds. Therefore, we made the raised garden beds and didn't plant anything in the actual spot. But I guess we were lucky, and in Salmon, many people do have big gardens, and so space wasn't really an issue for me.
Nice. All right, cool. So we have a question also from Bethany. Do you have any advice for growing a garden in an apartment without a balcony? That's a really good question, Bethany. Let's see. Without a balcony, indoors there are UV lights that you can get. I have one of my 5 roommates that I live with is growing peas in his room. He has these like red and purple lights in his room that kind of have the same effect, I believe, as the sun. And his peas are doing quite well. So he's able to grow things indoors. If you have any windows in your house, place your garden box by your window. If you have a front porch, maybe put them there. Also look into community gardens. That's an excellent resource also. If your community has a place that you can, that's just a shared space where people are planting vegetables and flowers and fruits and things. So I would look into that. Your home is not the only place that you can garden and that you can grow things. Maybe you have a neighbor who has some, maybe who has a bare backyard that wouldn't mind you, coming back a couple times a week to tend to some gardens. Maybe share your tomatoes with them, and that is payment enough. Let's see. Jocelyn says, any suggestions for people struggling to pay off numerous credit card bills? My suggestion would be to call them. Give your credit card company a call. Hey, and I would let them know, pull that volunteer card. Use it to your full advantage. Hey, I'm a volunteer. I'm working, in nonprofits. I'm not making much money, but, this is what I can pay each month, or is there a way to postpone these payments until, I have a higher income? Maybe they'll, work with you and do some sort of income-based thing. Yeah, call them and ask them, and and try to see what you can work out with them. Let's see. Dennis, do we have any questions on the phone?
At this time, I have no questions in queue on the phone. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1.
Awesome. So someone asked, why is there not a set amount for the living stipend across the board? And I think this has been answered sort of in the Q&A, maybe someone's answered it, but we'll reiterate, the average cost of living is different in every part of the country. For someone living maybe in, rural Kentucky, $1,200 or $900, $1,000, is going to go a lot further than it would in DC. As you can see, Eugenia's rent is almost $1,000. Granted, you're not making much more than that, but that is the reason that we adjust it. It's county by county. So for the county that you are living in, that's where your living allowance is based on. It's adjusted at the poverty level for the county that you're serving in. There are some people, currently we're adjusting, we're in a period of adjustment of living allowances right now where, we're taking a look at some counties to see if we need to raise or lower the living allowance there. But know that we're always monitoring those numbers and adjusting, as necessary. Let's see. Any other questions? Are there any ways or methods to receive free gas or money for fuel as my vehicle is necessary for my job? Not that I know of. I don't think I've ever heard of any free gas or fuel programs. Have you, Eugenia?
No, but if it's something for your site, I would recommend bringing that up with your supervisor, and maybe they can provide you with a transportation budget, or you could at least keep track of how many miles you're driving and then submit it to, the finance department and see if you can get some kind of reimbursement, because usually employees do that.
Oh, that's an excellent suggestion. Looks like someone put GasBuddy.com can help identify the cheapest gas in the area, and they also have a mobile app as well. Awesome. Someone asked a good question in the Q&A also that was, see if I can find it again. Someone says, you know, I'm a bit confused about the SNAP program. Seems that because I did not apply before starting VISTA, I will not be able to qualify. Does anyone have any experience or other information on this matter? So there is a caveat with your VISTA service and receiving SNAP benefits. I'll try to explain that simply. If you were receiving SNAP benefits before you started your service, that is, you had your card, there was money on your card, you had SNAP benefits before you started your service, your VISTA income does not count in determining your level of assistance. If you start your VISTA service and you receive SNAP benefits after you've started your service, that is, after your first day of service, you go and apply, you get your SNAP card, and you start receiving benefits, then your VISTA income does count towards your level of income. That is something to do with legislation and you know, things that are really out of our control. But that is sort of the situation. It does not mean that you don't qualify for those benefits. It just means that your VISTA stipend does have to be counted as income and in determining your level of assistance. See, I'll ask Dennis one more time. Do we have anyone on the phone? Maybe, maybe not. Anyone on the phone, Dennis?
At this time, I have no questions on the phone line, sir.
All right, wonderful. Let's see. Andrew Davis says, is it unheard of for a member of a VISTA sponsor organization to provide free housing? No, it's definitely not unheard of, but it's something that varies wildly from program to program. Some sponsor organizations do provide their members with housing. I know there are some, I think there's a college in Louisiana that lets their VISTA members stay in the student housing on campus. There are some programs that offer, you know, a housing voucher so that they say, we'll put $500 towards your rent. It is not standard across the board. I'm not going to say it's even common, but it's not uncommon, I guess, and it does happen, but it really varies from project to project. Let's see. What do we got? Does our living stipend even count as income? Because when I served as an AmeriCorps member through State National, it didn't count as income when I applied for Medi-Cal. I had a letter written and everything through the nonprofit I was hired through. So it really depends. Sometimes your VISTA stipend counts as income, sometimes it doesn't. And I know that's not a super great answer and not super clear, but you know, in terms of, there are some benefits where your VISTA stipend does not count. SNAP being one of the exceptions to that is that, you know, if you do apply for those benefits after you start your service, your stipend does count towards that. If you are applying for other public assistance, there is a letter available through the My AmeriCorps portal that is an income disregard letter, which basically states, you know, this person's income should not count towards their public assistance. Again, the exception being SNAP benefits. So take a look at that letter. And also there's a great section on the VISTA campus about, you know, what services will, you know, will require you to use your VISTA income as income and which don't. So take a look there, and that should, and I think that would definitely help out a little bit more. So let's see. I think we may have gotten to all the questions. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Any other comments from you, Eugenia?
Actually, I did think of something that I meant to mention earlier, which is another subreddit called Beer Money, and it is essentially just Reddit is. I don't know. I'm assuming that most people are pretty familiar with the website, but there are these subreddits where people post about different topics. Anyway, so Beer Money has links for different places, like legitimate places that will, you know, pay you like $1 to take, you know, a survey or, you know, just little things that, you know, then they pay you through PayPal or through an Amazon gift card. And again, it's beer money, so it's not like a significant source of income, but it is, you know, one thing that you can do in your free time. I do it, you know, you get a $5 Amazon gift card. It, you know, I order stuff from Amazon all the time, and it does, you know, any little bit helps.
Nice. Yeah, and something I was thinking of also, someone wrote in the comments, you know, that second-year members are a great resource, and that is so true. I am a member of quite a few alum groups on Facebook. You know, just general AmeriCorps alums of people from NCCC, that's VISTA members, that is state national members. So look for an alums group in your area. Typically, if you just type in, you know, San Francisco AmeriCorps alums, their group will pop up and you can join it. That is just like the best resource for housing. All those people, you know, have served in AmeriCorps before, so they, you know, maybe they are nearing the end of their service, and they're saying, hey, I'm about to move out of this place, it's wonderful, rent is super cheap, we're looking for someone else to fill this spot, you know, come on in. Excellent resources. You know, they typically do networking events, they will, you know, have happy hours, they will do service events, they'll do all kinds of things, you know, as another way to connect with other VISTAs, find resources. You know, you can go in there and ask a question on their, you know, on the Facebook wall, and people are so friendly and nice. Yeah, those are great resources. I'm a member of the DC, the Austin one, some NCCC alum groups, I mean, all kinds of alum groups. So yeah, check those out. Yeah, and I think that is a good resource. So before we wrap up, I'm going to ask Dennis one last time if we have any questions on the phone.
Sir, at this time I have no questions to queue on the phone line.
All right, wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you so much to Marie and to Eugenia for helping us out with this and coming on and sharing their stories, being very candid with us. We really appreciate you know, you guys being on here. That will wrap up our session today. Again, take a look at those resources. Before this webinar closes, if there's anything in the chat that you'd like to save, go ahead and copy and paste that over to a Word document or something so that you have those resources. Please look at them. Let's see, before we leave, I want to plug our next webinar, if I can. The next webinar is going to be Managing Up, Navigating the VISTA Supervisor Relationship. This is something that we have gotten in response to those reviews, you know, that everyone does. People have said, hey, I am having a hard time connecting with my supervisor. Maybe I feel like I have 8 supervisors and I don't know who to talk to. You know, what am I even doing on my project? This is going to be a great webinar for you to join if you have questions like that. Or if you're just interested in knowing, you know, and gaining some communication skills, or just knowing, you know, how to talk to your supervisor better. So again, check that out. That's going to be on May 12th, 2016 at 2 p.m. Eastern. That is Eastern time, so adjust for your local time zone. The invite for that will be going out via email soon. So yeah, take a look out for that. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. If you have any questions, please shoot us an email over to, you know, shoot us an email over to VISTA or ask your state office, and we'll be sure to get back with you.